Thank you for joining me, everyone. Here's part 2 of the Taming of Smeagol. Let's flow.
Determining how Gollum was going to animate was just an interesting exercise because we all had some ideas about what worked and what might not work.
The animation comes through either by using motion capture, or you can move that puppet by using the older traditional style of animation, which is called keyframe animation.
Randy became the spokesperson for the animation department and was completely against, in some ways, the motion capture.
Because Andy movements on Gollum don't look like Gollum movements necessarily. Sometimes they do.
There was a little bit of a rift, particularly because nothing had ever been done like this before.
Many battles ensued between, the entire company, basically, as to how this thing should be portrayed, and hours of countless meetings.
You get a motion capture team that's, world-class, using world-class equipment, and would absolutely love to be responsible for the motion driving, a memorable cinematic creature. And you've got very, very experienced world-class keyframe animators who would like exactly the same opportunity.
Yeah.
Motion capture is the technique that is time-saving, and it also provides an element of reality, which you sometimes can't get with animation.
When you move your head, there are other movements in your shoulder and your back that are very, very subtle that you're missing from the keyframe. They could maybe get it with lots of time, but there's limited time.
And that's one thing that motion capture just captures instantly, in real time. You don't even have to think about it.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. When you're doing 200 Gollum shots in a movie, you need every little help you can get to get down the road.
Yeah.
Now, it seems like it's an ideal
so many
technique,
different
but it's not
people
without its drawbacks, because Gollum
involved
is
in this,
ultimately not
just
a
making
human
Gollum.
person. So he needed to be able to do things that a human couldn't do. For instance, there's the opening sequence with Gollum in the Two Towers where he's crawling vertically down a rock face. Andy could never do that, and we never even shot that as a reference when we were filming the film, because we weren't going to have Andy crawling vertically down a rock face.
The only problem with motion capture is you can't do very intricate things like fingers and things, so that had to all then get applied later on.
We don't motion capture any facial work. All the facial work is done by keyframe.
And so you had the most important part of his performance, which was sort of what you see and hear, was really entirely up to the animation team. So the ultimate answer there is, if you could blend motion capture performance with keyframe animation performance, you would have a system that works. So that's the system that we developed at Weta.
No team was wrong or right. It was just one team wanted to do their best, and the other team wanted to do their best. And finally, it had to come down to, guys, let's look at this from the right perspective and realize that it's our combined efforts that are going to create this character.
Yeah.
The animators are extraordinary.
What a team effort, right?
They have to do so much. They have to be storytellers. They have to be actors. They have to be artists. They have to be all of it.
One of the most difficult things about dealing with Gollum as an animator is that you've got Gollum and Elijah and Sean on screen next to each other. And Sean and Elijah are amazing actors. So Gollum has to not only look like he fits in the scene and look correct and move correctly, he's actually got to act.
And we actually found that our little Gollum could be a good actor with a great animator behind him.
For instance, those close-ups of Gollum on the dead marshes when Gollum hears his name for the first time in half a millennium or so.
Smeagol.
I am just undone.
I still to this day don't know how the animators did that. I don't know how they take these pixels, which represent eyeballs, and actually manage to make you feel this emotion. But there's shots in the Two Towers where you just feeling Gollum's performance, really powerful.
The thing about animating a character like
my
Gollum
God, I am just beside
you have
myself.
to understand how a human actor does his craft.
Animation, by the very nature of it, is actors. Actors will use with pencils or actors with computers.
The notion that they're two different animals is, I think, a false one, because that's what a good animator does, is act.
But when you're
I
animating,
hadn't even thought of that.
you have to act one frame at a time, 24 frames per second, for 3 weeks or whatever, or however long it is for you to finish the shot. One of the biggest challenges, I think, with being an animator is trying to bring an energy and a vitality to that shot for so many days in a row.
I'm so in awe of what the animators have done, really.
Yeah.
They've been able to basically interpret my performance and give it that that level of photorealism and reality.
You just don't think about him being anything other than a character in the film, and a dominant character in the film.
Right.
The animators achieved a milestone in animation with Gollum, and they've brought a lot of magic, old and new, to these films.
It's a tough job, and I think they just did such a brilliant job. Thank God for them.
Gollum's performance was a great culmination of motion capture and keyframe. But what we actually came up with in a lot of cases was a third path.
When we filmed during production, often we would film with Andy in, and then we would have Andy taken out of the scene with the idea that that blank space where Andy was would be filled in by Gollum.
But one of the things that was very apparent was that the performances were always better from everybody in the Andy plates.
This is Sting. You've seen it before.
Yeah.
Haven't you?
You get some things that you might not have thought of that just come out of the physicality of being in that situation with the other people.
The Andy plates also had all the physical contact. You didn't get any of that on the Mind Pass. And it was just a much more high energy, great moments in those plates.
We found, in fact, it was better to leave Andy in the shot and basically draw him out.
And what we could do
is
draw him out. Superimpose our Gollum character onto Andy and literally mimic Andy's motion. So we're basically rotoscoping, which is tracking his motion frame by frame. And Gollum would be doing almost exactly the same thing that Andy was doing in the shot.
It was basically doing motion capture through animation.
That became often the technique that we used.
What is happening to me? This is just beyond. This is the best thing I've ever seen.
I mean, this has been around since Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So Disney often shot live-action performers and then had as animators basically, use them as a reference. All the high-tech stuff and the motion capture and everything else that's surrounding us, just that simple live-action reference that Disney found so helpful 50, 60 years ago was also a really great way to go for us. Now, a lot of times the only way to accomplish that was to put Gollum as much as possible in Andy's place and then paint Andy out of the scene.
Which is a completely painstaking operation for them, and it took hundreds of man hours, but really pays off because there's that real interaction, and that's what Peter was after. The other side benefit to roto animation was this was actually a shorthand way for Peter to get across the animators exactly what he wanted, and the animators then could be sort of motivated and inspired by Andy's actual performance.
So for the shots where Andy was doing something exactly like what we wanted, we could match it as close as possible, but still tweak the motion a little bit to look like Gollum. For example, in the fight sequence where Gollum climbs up on top of Sam and bites him in the neck, and Andy's performance, Andy couldn't actually physically do that. If he jumped up on top of Sean Astin, Sean would be like, ah!
Right,
and fall over. So we had to take Andy's performance, look at it in terms of what he was doing and how he was manipulating Sean, and then remove him completely and reanimate Gollum in a way that would manipulate Sean in the same way, but work better as a Gollum character as opposed to as Andy Serkis. So this is the original Andy plate, where Andy Serkis and Sean Astin were out there shooting. And while we were watching it, we could tell that this sort of wrestling move where Gollum goes in and does the headbutt, wouldn't really sell for his character, and so we wanted to be a little bit more frightening. So if we look at this, you can see there's this big jerk that happens. And in the original plate, this was where Andy grabbed him and did the headbutt. So what kind of thing could we do that would make Sam have that motion? And I basically decided to give a shot of trying to see if Gollum maybe grabbed onto his head and yanked him forward like that. Maybe that would work. So we take a look at the actual animation version. You can see that Gollum grabs onto his head and starts shaking him. If we were to just take and roto Andy's motion exactly, this is what we would end up with. And you can see that it doesn't quite have the same sort of energetic and crazed feel that the animation version does. Because we've taken some of the ideas of what Andy was doing and then pushing it to really work with the plate. And then we'll take a look again at the final shot. Once the shot's all rendered and lit.
I love this.
Overnight, so that the next morning we could
I love
see
everybody involved.
the dailies of what the animators
I love you all.
did previously, and it was just incredible how everything kind of came together. Sometimes the renders wouldn't go right, and so we had some hysterical stuff. Sometimes Gollum's hair would be sticking straight up, and it was just hysterical. It's like the computer kind of did its own thing. I think there was one time where
the computer is like, I am so confused.
Head,
oh
and
no!
went and did the whole motion and everything, and then later on they all kind of snapped back into each other. It's like you couldn't even think that kind of stuff up. It was so weird.
getting Gollum's performance and animation to work properly was absolutely critical. The other half of the equation was Gollum had to look absolutely real next to Sam and Frodo.
And one of the challenges that you have in creating believable characters to make a skin quality that semi-translucent.
Skin is actually very translucent. Majority of the color you see of skin doesn't come from the pigment on the top layer of the skin. It comes from the blood vessels and the fatty tissue layers underneath. And before the past year or so, you never really noticed computer graphics, people doing translucent effects.
So when I got to Weta, I immediately started looking at ways to implement that. I was walking through Weta Workshop one day, and there on the floor was the boat with Boromir in it from the death scene. And it looked like he had just died and they'd put him in the boat. And I thought, if we could get this up on screen for Gollum, we would have what we need. So I found Gino Acevedo, who had painted Boromir, and said, Gino, tell me how you did that.
It's all done on the surface, and it's all built up with different layers of washes of color to get the translucency and everything, to make it look like there are veins that are just, just below the skin surface and everything.
So I thought,
my goodness,
this could work for us. So convinced Gino to train as a digital paint artist, and got him a computer and had him start painting Gollum.
And I had never done any computer stuff except for email, which I still struggle at.
Wait,
so we
what?
actually cross-trained Gino and the lead texture painter, Sergei Nevzhipov.
On the spot?
Gino showed our texture painters how to airbrush and the techniques he uses to get those patterns. And then they taught Gino how to paint on the computer.
Sergei is from Russia, so his English is not so good. So here I am, panicked anyway about learning this computer stuff.
Okay.
Then all of a sudden he'd start talking, then he'd break into Russian. And I said, it's like, what? What was that?
Right.
Goes, oh, no, sorry. And it was just like,
my
massive
goodness.
headaches that week. But it was fantastic. I learned a huge amount, and I owe a lot to Sergei for all that.
Then the texture painters
the
proceeded
obstacles
to
they
paint the color,
face.
just pretending they were airbrushing. I think without it, we could not have made Gollum look nearly as good as he did.
Also talking with Pete, he really wanted to see his knees and his elbows and the palms of his hands to be and his feet to be really, really dirty. And for reference, one day he says, "Well, like this."
Oh my
and he
God,
pulls
this
up
is
his foot.
just
It's
so
like,
wonderful.
oh my God, he's got nice feet, Pete, but the bottom sides are just really dirty and calloused and everything. I said, "Oh, that's perfect reference." So Gollum's feet, in the film, those are Pete's. Pete's feet.
Oh my God,
What we
I am done.
was something that had a really good physical starting point for us, and just used tried and true, but very well done film techniques to bring Gollum to the screen.
I'd always imagined Gollum as being this really sinister, character that was really, mean and evil and creepy and stuff. And all of a sudden you get this shot, and Gollum's bouncing around, and he's like, look, see what Smeagol finds?
Right.
Personally, when I read Gollum, I don't see him as quite as active character.
I think all the animators were really struggling to understand who the character was. And because we didn't know who he was, we just knew that there was this guy in a gimp suit bouncing around. And we're thinking of Gollum as this really sinister character.
And so Fran and myself spent an evening talking to the animators with everybody there, everybody present, all the Golemites, to talk through every single
He said
This wasn't about, these guys are getting it wrong. It's, oh my God, we hadn't told them enough.
This is the first time we'd actually heard of a character arc for him and understood that, Gollum is this really sadistic parent, and Smeagol's this little kid who just wants, he's just trying to do the right thing, and Gollum is just like, basically beating him up mentally.
These are not just things that are convenient for the animator to know, they're crucial for the animator to know if he's going to give an honest performance.
And we had gotten lost in technicalities for a spell, and we needed to be snapped back into reality of creating an actor.
Yeah.
Once they could get a sense of the whole arc of the journey of the character and see the route that Fran and I had been taking, it seemed to make more sense to everybody.
It was palpable in the room, the willingness to jump into the work after it was done. It was an amazing thing to see.
And it was actually at that point that Fran really took control of the Gollum Sméagol character, and she started to write.
Fran had this ambition to turn Gollum into an even more complex and rich character than he already was on the page.
The changes in the writing made it clear that this was someone that was a hobbit, basically, and he had this sweet side to his personality, and he got corrupted by the ring.
It's not simply about Gollum being this greedy, covetous kind of creature. He has no choice in a certain way. He's so addicted to the ring, and his need for it is so strong that it is at war with his sort of Smeagol nature.
And making that clear to the audience of all.
Oh, so you got these amazing scenes that got added in process, like the schizoid scene.
And I loved it. As soon as I read it, I was like, oh, God, I love this scene.
Yeah. Look at you, loving your own work. I know that's right.
The last scenes that we
I
did.
heard
It
that.
was just a masterstroke.
Because I loved it too.
And the fact that it was there made the whole character.
Having a theatrical background enabled me to play scenes like the schizophrenic scene as a one shot. What was for me interesting was to see one going into the other.
Master doesn't enrich you. Master doesn't get you. Master is using you.
There were some scenes where we used no Andy reference at all. There were some scenes where we used Andy reference a bit. But that was one where we used it to the letter.
Master's my friend. You don't have any friends. Nobody likes you. Not listening. Not listening.
Oh my God, this is such amazing performance.
It's not a matter of going in and just copying the movement. It's a matter of going in and tapping into the emotional content of what's going on, the subtext and how it plays, how they played off each other. I think some of that was probably the strongest animation to date.
And it's probably the best, in my opinion, best actor scene in the picture. And it goes to a digital guy.
There's just wonderful pathos in that scene.
Goes to a digital guy.
It's sort of the defining moment of understanding what this character has gone through for the last few hundred years, arguing between itself, and finally Smeagol winning out. It's a great moment.
The wonderful thing about Gollum is that he's really the culmination of a huge amount of talent that's spread across the entire production. You know, it started with the writing, with the design, through to the on-set acting.
This is phenomenal.
Post-production, where we had to do voice, we had to do the rendering, the animating, the compositing, and ultimately Howard Shore had to write music for Gollum. So to me, Gollum represents a great example of a wonderful collaboration amongst a broad group of talents.
It's fascinating to see something on screen and to marvel at how incredible it is and how connected you feel to it. And
Marvel.
To understand
That's the perfect
what it
word.
took to get there, especially having been on set and working with Andy as an actor and not knowing necessarily how it was all going to turn out. And then to see it fully realized and to believe it.
Yeah.
To feel it.
To see Gollum finally with people responding to him and feeling that communicating their kind of energy into it. It was unbelievable. And I'll never forget that.
Everybody that I spoke to at the film that's not involved with the film has said that Gollum sticks in their head all the time, and it's not because he's ugly or because he's frightening, but because his performance is so striking.
I made a certain set of acting decisions. Animators made a certain set of animating decisions. You know, Peter directed in a certain way. Philippa crafted the writing, and all these things have come together to make something that exists in people's minds now in a really potent way. And that's the great thing. That's the great thing. He exists in people's psyches now, you know. And I think for me, that's the total reward.
It's unbelievable. Was that it? Oh, dang, that was it. Okay, I'm gonna let it load the next one. I'm speechless, you guys. I really am. I was moved the entire way through that video. And it was just one video, and it was dedicated all to Smeagol and Gollum. And it just took my breath away. It really did. I was like welling up with emotion, tears, like my eyes were stinging. Because the performance was just so marvelous. Who was it that said it? Elijah Wood was like, you know, you marvel at this creature. And yeah, it is a universal sentiment that Gollum is a really phenomenal character. I was just so excited to see, it's not doing what I wanted to do. Okay, I was so excited to see how they were able to bring Gollum to life, and they did not disappoint. They actually exceeded my expectations by far. I'm just beside myself. Like, I don't even have any words. Like, it's just phenomenal. Like, you know, it's really gotten to a point to where these behind the scenes is just evoking so much emotion from me in a way that nothing ever has. Not even the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Like, the Lord of the Rings trilogy was really mind-blowing movie making, right? But there's another dynamic here. There's something else about these behind the scenes appendices that just put it in a whole other category. Like, I've never seen anything like this before. And it's so interesting just learning about the filmmaking process for the Lord of the Rings seems to be even more entertaining than the Lord of the Rings itself. I just don't even know what to say. You know, I'm really eager to rewatch the movies just with all of this information that I have, because it's just, like I said, it's going to enrich my viewing experience. But I just can't get enough of learning about the process. I just, like, even the last video, like, I'm not normally someone who would be interested in swords and what was it, armor and all that kind of stuff, but the way that they put it together was just captivating. And the way that they put this particular video together just catapulted the whole series into a whole other realm for me. Like, I am just blown away, and I feel like I could rewatch just the appendices over and over again and be perfectly happy for the rest of my life, because it is evoking emotion that I didn't even know that I had. Let me tell you something. When Andy Serkis came to join the project after his audition, that audition, like, I had chills, and I felt what he was feeling. Like, it was so impressive, you know, it was so impressive. Like, I just had never, I don't know, been exposed to that type of, like, brilliance, you know, in that way, where it's just like, whoa, you are really something else, sir. Like, really, from beginning to end, and how they showed him. I loved how their concept of Gollum had to evolve because Andy Serkis came into onto the project, right? And so their concept of Gollum had to change. They had to change the way Gollum looked, and they changed the idea of, Andy was supposed to just be the voiceover, if I'm correct, right? He was just supposed to be like the voiceover actor, which he would have, you know, like, been phenomenal at, of course. But just the way he moved, you know, they had to have him physically as a part of the project, which was a genius idea. And so their idea just continued to evolve. And I loved how making Gollum was a team effort. Did you see all those different people? Normally we see a lot of familiar faces in these behind the scenes, but there were a whole bunch of different faces that I had never seen before. And it was all in just making Gollum. You know, I love the scene with the motion capture because they explained it so well. You know, I got it. And the idea that Gollum's acting was digital, the acting was digital. And so it just never really occurred to me that the person who is creating the animation also has to be an actor. Like, they have to literally put together these facial expressions each scene, you know, and it takes hundreds of hours to do that. And so I knew that learning about Gollum would tickle my fancy, you know, but this just blew me away. I am completely outdone. I am speechless, but I have to, like, come up with words you know, for you guys, but these words just really pale in comparison to how I'm actually feeling. Like, for me to say that this is better than the Lord of the Rings, like the whole entire trilogy, because this is like a crescendo. Like, this particular video is just like, okay, you know, I've been holding back, you know, the idea of the appendices may actually be better than the Lord of the Rings, but at this point, they're just, you know, blowing it out of the water, video after video after video, that, yeah, okay, I can see that. Because it's like, you watch The Lord of the Rings, and then if you are fortunate enough to watch the Appendices, and then you watch it again, it's just, it changes the whole entire experience just because of this particular documentary. And I can't stress it enough that I enjoy documentaries, but the documentaries that I have seen before have just been, you know, presenting the facts. These are the facts. These are the facts. These are the facts. These are the facts. And, you know, and they present it in a creative way that, you know, it's okay. You know, I can sit there for like that 60-minute, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, an hour and a half, whatever, learning about the facts of whatever particular subject in, you know, an entertaining way. But this is just beyond anything I've ever seen. This is not just an entertaining way. Like, this is another miracle. And so, because the way that they choose the clips that they piece together, all of this footage, and it is literally a miracle. So I think you would see me like welling up. I was welling up through this, because welling up with tears, because I was so moved. Like, I cannot even express how wonderful this was to see. They just keep outdoing themselves. So, you know, I cannot express my gratitude enough to you guys for encouraging me to watch the behind the scenes, because, you know, I would have just kind of gotten around to it eventually. You know, behind the scenes, I've already seen the greatest movie trilogy that exists in the world. So, you know, I'll get to the behind the scenes to learn about it. But lo and behold, it's like the most wonderful thing I've ever seen. So, all right, that's gonna be it, you guys. I'm just gonna wrap it up here, and I can't wait to get into some more of these videos. You know, I'm already like breathless just from watching the Two Towers, so I can only imagine what the Return of the King is gonna be like too, because I don't even want this journey to end. Okay. All right, you guys. That's gonna be it, and I will see you guys again next time, okay? Until next time, let's flow.